Hello, my name is Lars Graugard. First of all, I should tell you that after my presentation here, there will be a short break. So be patient with me for about 20 minutes. I will talk on the theme that I have proposed, which is not a question, it's a statement, and it's called What Next? Why am I interested in this particularly, and why do I think that it is something that can also be spread out into a wider context? That is because my background is both as an academic score composer and also in different forms of interactive music, electronic music, algorithmically driven music and so forth. So I'm mixing quite a number of styles in my output. And we can also see that there are many different approaches in electronic music to how to go about making music, and how many of these emphasize the possibility to interact in real time, either intuitively, directly physically, or by some form of mediation. And I think that is a tendency that will keep growing over the next foreseeable future. And I would then like to give my reflections on this. First, my background, which means that I am interested, well, better rephrase that. When we use software, there is a tendency that we use software for isolated cases. So we pick the software that will serve us for this, the other, or some different purpose. And what I have discovered that my need is actually to find that one software environment where I can fit in all my different backgrounds, so that I, with the same software, actually can move freely between quite disparate styles. And I'd like to give you a couple of examples of these styles. Oh, excuse me. So this is a good question for this moment here. How do I get online? Do we have a cable Ethernet connection here I can use?
No, use the Wi-Fi. It's called the AOV 5 gigahertz.
Okay. Just a moment then. Yeah, thanks. I've got this as well, actually. Okay. I'm just trying to do that.
AOV 5 gigahertz.
So this is a video from a performance. I'm presently having a artist residency at New York University, where I'm doing different projects that deal with music and technology. And okay, so the next issue here is a bit of sound. This is, yeah. So does network work? No, it doesn't. Well, I'm not connected to it. It's better than a cable. You want a cable? Is that the equipment working? So there's clearly a stylistic reference to classical music. It's very clear. The interaction is done in real time with different, reasonably well-known techniques with their variations according to what was the artistic intentions with the piece. So another example that I'd like to give to you is this work. Let's see, might have it in a better version up here. So this piece is a kind of a hybrid in that it uses a combination of music recording but real-time visual information to play back the music that is recorded, and this is then further processed at the moment of the performance. Just take it a little bit further. So it means that when the musicians via microphones are making tiny noisy sounds, these are then being recorded, but they are only being played back at the when they're making gestures. So I'm playing with this contradiction that the sound source and the playback of the sound source are removed, run from the other. And in addition to the piece that I played for you before, the violinist in the previous piece, that part is completely written out. But here there's nothing written out. It's a question, it's a sequence of instructions. So there's a general aim of the piece, which is then like a theatrical script described to the musicians. And then they have to recreate it dynamically together in collaboration on stage. And the piece is called Walk, because it's basically what they need to do. Light is falling on them as they're sitting in a circle, in a semicircle. And as light falls on them, they're instructed in either to move or to play alternatingly. Yeah. So as this piece develops in intensity, it then ends in this kind of explosion. So it's like they are walking up towards an invisible barrier. As the energy builds up, it is then there's a breakthrough in the music. So in this piece, maybe you noticed it, but in this piece, it's there's also the interest in the rhythmic elements. So there is in this music influence from other kinds of music that are not necessarily from the classical tradition, and I have several activities in the field with improvising players, but improvising players from a jazz background. Maybe we should take these. And this is an example of an interactive piece of the same nature in an improvisatory setting. Maybe take it over. So you can see now we're definitely moving away from a classical academic approach to what are the main points of what are we searching for in music. Because when you move between styles of music, you notice that the interest in terms of musical creation, they vary quite a lot. There's a double bass, of course, and then with the interactive electronics. So this music is entirely improvised. And there is a degree of interaction between the players and the computer, but only to a certain degree. And this is where I've been working on ways to combine the structures, given structures for an idea of a piece, but also with permitting the chance to develop that as the piece is unfolding. And a different example of this is, since we're not online, I'll play it from pre-recorded material, which is here. So here there's a much larger degree of interaction. This is a bass clarinet where the sustained sheets of sound are derived from spectral snapshots of the player, and where the way that these sheets are played back in melodies and so forth are based on analysis of the player's activities, so that there is knowledge about the pitches, the combination of pitches, the durations, and derived ideas about tonality used by the computer in making then selections for how to respond. And it's made as in a short-term memory, a bit like ourselves, so we only have memory of the last 8 to 10 seconds, and that this is the background for the response. bass line in this case is also derived from the instrumentalist. And this has a clear pulsation here, and if we take that a bit further, like this. We can hear the connectedness between the bass clarinetist and some of the responses in the melodic material. So that's created in at the moment. You'll have to trust me since this is a playback, but this was how it was made. And it's also a short recording session, like the snippet that I just played for you before. It's basically a 2-hour session of different musical ideas, and that's then being collected into different to a sequence of pieces for release. Now, this method of generating melodies is also something that I'm using in music which is much more beat-based and do not require the input of a player. So I try to maintain the interactivity and the possibility of the moment to create an influenced melodic material, even when it's I'm using a laptop. And that is, I'm originally trained a music performer with an instrument, but I don't play this instrument any longer. My aim has been to turn this thing into something equivalent of an instrument. And by doing so, of course, you understand how, trying to do that, you understand how, well, simple it is as a musical instrument, but also how powerful it is, because the spectrum of possibilities is so huge. But I'll give you an example of how this is working with the melody generation. So this is basically a track generated also in the same way, recorded as an improvisation over a number of musical ideas, and then edited into an essence, a bit shorter duration, better suited for non-live listening. Maybe we can take it up a little bit, yes. So these small melodic snippets are continuously varied, but they have a self-similarity sufficient to that we identify it. We put them into the same a connectedness, so that we have a gestalt of that this is coming from one source. And the bass line do also have at moments some elements of the same procedure of generating parts of it as individual melodic fragments. I'll just jump to it. Towards the end, this melodic material on top is generated the same way. And the naturalness of it is because it's based on knowledge of a large number of musical samples of melodies. And as coincidence has it, it's actually a large database of German folk tunes. It doesn't maybe sound like a German folk tune, but that is, of course, because each of the instantiations of choices do not coincide with the original material, but over time they will have the same characteristics. And I should say that what we've just been hearing now is being performed with the same software as all the preceding things that I played for you. And that's really what my aim was here today. That was to show to you my intention to have in one piece of software such extremes, because I move between styles, and I very often, music is not something clean in one style. It's actually always a mix of something. So the music in this sense is very impure, and I want to retain that impurity in the software so that I can project my ideas easily without being restricted by software specialized for this and that. To show you the extreme of this beat-based music in terms of my interest, I want to show you one final work, which is this, I guess, which will then end my presentation and take you into maybe questions and then a coffee break. So take up the volume, please. Thank you. So, any questions? If not,
I was just curious about the processes that you use to generate the generating algorithm. Is it algorithmic, or are you pattern-based recognition in the sounds, or how are you generating
the melodic material?
Yeah, the patterns in both the acoustic stuff and in the electroacoustic.
It's done a bit differently, but in this with the melodic stuff without an input, it's the probabilities for the next melodic step, which is then multiplied by the probability of the position of what you would call an instrument. So it's based on what we know, that when we have a range of an instrument, there is the likelihood that we play in the middle of that instrument and less in the extremes. So that can then be described as well. Yeah. And then it's also multiplied with a kind of sieve that deals with the tonality. And then I am also using morphing between tonalities, so that's, well, just to give a brief idea of what is happening. And then rather than speculating about what is the correct way to go from one tonality to the other, I use techniques that are typical of a computer, where it's very easy and straightforward to do morphing. So rather than suggest that it's something functional, I just use the characteristics of the instrument, in the sense also that this being my instrument, I'm not afraid of its characteristics. I don't try to do something which is more natural in another situation if there's something which I find correct to do, given the restrictions and characters of this instrument. And not implemented, but of something I'm working on, that is also to use a next layer, which is to make a selection based on a tonal orientation, so that you would have pitches that are more in the center of tonality on stronger beats, and less so on weaker beats, so that you actually get tonal accents rather than only amplitude accents that go with patterns, so that you basically can hear the rhythm just by the choice of the pitches, which is also something you would find very much in human melodies. Yeah. Yeah. So, and for the real-time stuff, I am trying to take some of these methods and then using that on processing the outcome of the result of the input analysis. And the input analysis in itself of an audio signal is a challenge, as we know, to get something which is sufficiently close to what was actually being done, or what was perceived being done. And this one, I can assure you I haven't solved that, but at least some of these methods for then generating a response work sufficiently well to make the connection between the player and the machine, so that the player feels invited into the total outcome from the speakers.
And I have a question. How do you share the results of your work, or do you?
I share it by... I've made, this work, how can I say this? I have been moving into these very hybrid musical forms and into beat-based music over the last 3 years. It's been a long process, and I originally come from improvised music before the conservatory. And then we're talking about the last millennium, no? Long time ago. But I have found the online releases a good way to have a fast process of creating and sharing and moving on. So that has been what I've been doing up till now. So these recordings and also videos, they are then online, available for download and Creative Commons and all these things. What I see now is happening is that it may become more relevant to also do something on physical formats of this material. Outside of that, I've made many recordings of different kinds. And the code is all Max MSB stuff. And I have been very... I tend to use jitter more and more for processing this kind of statistical information and so forth, because it's just much more efficient for that.
You would have, it would be possible to listen to some of the other stuff that you've done on your website. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. See, we're not online, but and this is not available either. Okay, so yes, it's available on all the works have their individual entry, And on these entries, there's some information, and there's a link then to where it can be either downloaded, or there's a video, or there's a listening opportunities through SoundCloud, also there directly. And I should say, I have not spoken about it, but I have about 140 score of works where there's no computer involved. Many of these are recorded, and they also are available there for online listening.